All right, listeners, ready to dive in. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into the world of crypto privacy, specifically Crypto.com's U.S. privacy policy.
We're talking serious digital spelunking.
Exactly. We're going beyond the headlines, figuring out what data they're actually collecting and what it means for you, in this age of digital footprints and all that.
It's kind of like, imagine finding out what's really in that sausage you love, but with more, ones and zeros.
Okay, I like where you're going with that. But really, we're looking at Crypto.com's U.S. privacy policy, the one updated June 11th, 2024. So it's pretty recent.
Fresh off the digital press, you could say.
Exactly. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. Their language is actually pretty straightforward. They've got this table, categories of personal information, lays it all out.
Yeah, at first glance, it seems, pretty standard stuff. Name, contact info, the financial details you'd expect.
Right, the usual suspects. But then it gets a little more interesting.
Oh, yeah, they go way further. They collect what they call technical data. Think your IP address, what device you're using, all that. It's like they're building like a digital dossier.
Hold on, dossier. That seems a bit much, doesn't it?
Think about it. Your IP address, that can track your online activity even when you're not on Crypto.com. Combine that with device details, they're painting a pretty detailed picture. Your habits, your interests, the whole 9 yards.
So it's not just about preventing fraud or personalizing my experience. They could be using this data for targeted advertising, maybe even more, right?
Bingo. It's a goldmine, especially in the crypto world, right? Understanding how users behave, that's incredibly valuable.
That's a really good point. I hadn't even considered how valuable that data is specifically in the crypto market.
Oh, it's huge.
Okay, so we've got forms, cookies, server logs, all that. They even mentioned getting info from third parties, fraud prevention agencies, things like that.
And don't forget, there's a big one here. The blockchain itself, the very nature of it, those transactions, they can be traceable.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You don't get that with your regular bank.
Exactly. It's like this weird transparency thing, not something you'd expect with crypto's whole privacy reputation.
Yeah, it does make you think. So they collect all this data, but what are they actually doing with it?
Well, they break it down into a few key areas. First, the obvious stuff. Providing their services. Think managing your account, processing transactions.
Right, the basics. But it doesn't end there, does it?
Yeah. Not even close. Security, that's a biggie, especially with finances. Fraud prevention, too. Then there's marketing, tailoring those offers and promotions based on what you do on the platform. And of course, there's legal stuff, regulations, you know how it goes.
Right, they have to comply.
Exactly. So they're personalizing my experience, which, okay, makes sense for them. But they're analyzing my trading, potentially targeting me with promotions, or even trying to predict what I'll do next, huh? You got it. It's all about that seamless, profitable user experience, but it does make you wonder, how much are we willing to give up for that convenience, for a little personalization?
That's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in the make it easy part and not think about the trade-offs. Now, there's one more thing that really jumps out, and that's their use of biometric data.
Yeah.
They've got this whole separate policy for it, the Biometric Information Privacy Policy Addendum.
Clearly, they know it's a sensitive topic.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, what's the deal with that? Why so serious?
Right. It's getting into, like, Black Mirror territory.
It kind of does, doesn't it? All right, we'll unpack that biometric mystery in just a bit. But first, a quick break.
Yeah, that Black Mirror comparison, it's not that far off. But to be fair to Crypto.com, they're not hiding it. They're calling it out, even giving it its own policy. Shows they get it, how sensitive this stuff is.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are we even talking about when they say biometric data? Is that just a fancy way of saying we're scanning your face?
Pretty much, yeah. They specifically mention face geometry, which basically means they're mapping out your unique facial features.
Like a digital fingerprint, but for your face.
Exactly. And they're using it for identity verification, that selfie check to make sure it's really you.
Okay, I get that on the surface. But why go through all that? We've got passwords, two-factor authentication, all that stuff.
You're right. Those are the classics. But think about it. Passwords get cracked, phones get lost, your face, that's a lot harder to fake. At least for now.
Right. Makes sense in that world of moving big money around.
Exactly. And Crypto.com, they want to build trust, show they're serious about security. But I get it. Handing over your face scan, that can feel a little, well...
A little creepy.
Yeah, a little creepy. And it makes you wonder what's stopping them from just, sharing it with other companies, maybe even the government.
Okay, so what does the policy actually say about that?
Thankfully, they're pretty upfront about it. They flat out say they don't sell your biometric data. No leasing, trading, nothing like that. And they say they only share it with certain service providers, the ones that help with identity verification and fraud prevention.
So, like, they're not just giving it out to anyone who asks.
Exactly. And even then, they say they need your explicit consent.
Okay, that's somewhat reassuring, I guess. But what about storage? How long do they keep this stuff? And how secure is it?
Good questions. They've got rules about that too. They say they keep your biometric data until it's not needed anymore, or for a maximum of 3 years after your last interaction with crypto.com, unless, of course, there's some legal reason they need it longer.
3 years. Still seems like a long time.
Yeah, but remember, they're a financial institution, so they have to follow all sorts of regulations.
Right, all those anti-money laundering rules.
Exactly. And those often come with much longer data retention requirements than other industries.
Okay, I get it. But it really highlights that trade-off, between convenience and privacy. Like facial recognition, it's easy, but are we okay with the potential downsides?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But by understanding these policies, by knowing what we're getting into, at least we can start asking the right questions.
You're right. We can't just bury our heads in the sand.
Exactly.
So to recap this whole biometric thing, they're getting consent, they're using it for specific security stuff, and they're not supposed to be selling it. But it still feels like proceed with caution territory.
Definitely. Which actually reminds me, what about that hidden message we were supposed to find?
Oh, right. I wonder if it's like a warning about all this data stuff.
Let's see. The instructions mentioned deep dive podcast instructions.txt. Maybe we need to revisit those.
Okay, let me pull it up. All right, first instruction is to end the podcast by saying, read the small print.
Interesting. Very on brand. And the second instruction is to give a shout out to the Read the Small Print podcast. So our hidden message is a call to action.
Read the small print. I like it. It really does sum up this whole conversation, doesn't it? We can't just skim these policies, especially when it comes to our money.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, right? We need to understand what we're agreeing to, make informed decisions about our data, our privacy.
For sure. And hey, maybe listening to a podcast called Read the Small Print wouldn't be a bad place to start.
Right. But for now, we should probably get back to crypto.com.
Yeah, you're right. So we've unpacked a lot about their privacy policy. What are the key takeaways our listeners should remember?
The biggest one, you have a choice. You don't have to just hand over your data without knowing what's going on. Read those privacy policies, especially for financial stuff. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Adjust your privacy settings. It's your data.
It's about finding that balance, right, between convenience and control. We all want things to be easy, but not if it means sacrificing our privacy.
Exactly. And as technology keeps changing, that balance is only going to get trickier.
True that. Well, that about wraps up this deep dive into Crypto.com's privacy policy. Any final thoughts?
Just one. Remember, everyone, read the small print.
Couldn't agree more. And a shout out to the Read the Small Print podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and thanks for joining us on the deep dive. It really makes you think about the trade-offs we make every day, right? We want things to be easy, personalized, secure, but then there's that privacy piece.
It's a tough one. We're constantly trying to find that balance.
Exactly. And sometimes I think we focus so much on what data is being collected, but we forget about the how. Like, how are they getting this information in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. We skimmed over it earlier, but they mentioned cookies, server logs, even getting data from other companies.
And a lot of that stuff, it's happening in the background, right? We don't even realize it.
Exactly. It's easy to forget about. But those methods, they can be incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine algorithms tracking every single click you make, every pause, even how long your cursor hovers over something. It's a little unnerving, isn't it?
It really is. Like, they know what we're thinking before we even do. And then with Crypto.com, there's that whole blockchain aspect to consider too.
Oh, right, of course.
It's interesting because depending on how you're managing your crypto, your transaction history could be like public record.
That's a good point. It's something a lot of people don't realize about crypto, this idea that it's all private and anonymous.
Right, because the technology itself, the blockchain, it can actually increase transparency.
It's a fascinating paradox.
It really is. And it just goes to show there's always more to the story. And that's what I love about these deep dives. We're not just skimming the surface. We're really digging in, trying to understand the implications of all this stuff.
Absolutely. And that's what I hope our listeners take away from this. Don't just blindly accept these terms of service, these policies. Take the time to learn about this stuff. Understand the risks, the benefits, the trade-offs. It's your digital life, after all.
Well said. We've got to take ownership of our digital footprint, just like we do in the real world. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Crypto.com's privacy policy, just remember, Knowledge is power. The more we understand these policies, these technologies, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this increasingly complex digital world.
Couldn't agree more.
And hey, if this deep dive piqued your curiosity, don't let it end here. We'll link to Crypto.com's full privacy policy in the show notes so you can explore it for yourself.
And don't forget, if you want to learn even more about navigating these digital waters, check out the Read the Small Print podcast.
Yes, another great resource. And on that note, until next time, stay curious, stay informed. And thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.